Hey everybody and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to make some jelly prints on this drawing paper, and that's not a very expensive drawing pad that I buy in my local art supply store, and it has 170 GSM. It is a square format. I think it's 20 by 20 centimeters, and I really like it just for experimenting, for sketching, for jelly printing. It's quite smooth, and I'm going to use it today with some soft pastels to create some interesting textures, and then I'm going to make some vintagey backgrounds out of these. I'm applying the soft pastels quite loosely all over the plate, not in every area. I try not to cover everything up. And I'm using some Paul Rubens soft pastels here. You have to use some softer pastels to get them down on the jelly plate. For example, the Royal Talents ones, the Rembrandt ones, they are a bit too hard. And I think also the Arctics do not really work, but I really love the Paul Rubens. Schmincke and Stencils also work really nicely over the top of the jelly plate. You can then cover everything with a layer of acrylic paint. I'm using some Titan Buff. I think it's the light version, Titan Buff Light. It's almost white. It's a creamy color, and I prefer this against white because it looks a bit not as strong as a white paint will do. And then I'm going to pull the print, and you have different options now. You can pull the print immediately, and then there will remain quite a lot pastel on the jelly plate. And you also can wait for your print to dry completely, which will take at least an hour, I would say. And then you will get off every pigment you have on the jelly plate. As I've used a bit too much of the acrylic paint, I have not a lot of pigment going on, but I got a really interesting background, which will be perfect for a vintage look. But also if you have a too thick layer of paint, it will not grab too much of the pastel. If you have a thin layer of paint, it will grab more of the pastel, and if you let the paper dry on the plate, you will get not everything, but a lot. Pastels stick very good to the jelly plate, only to the original one. I have tested the one from Craftelier, which does not work with the soft pastels. To clean your jelly plate afterwards, you can use baby oil, and that will remove the pastel pigments. And then you just clean it with some mild soap and water. Here I now applied some white paint because there was so much left on the plate that I then hopefully will get some more contrast on the background, because there was still a little bit of that Titan Buff color and a lot of pigment. And I made sure to just layer up a really small amount of paint. And also this paper is not the best for jelly printing, because you have to work quite quickly so you don't tear your paper, or you have to let it dry completely. If you wait too long and then remove it too wet, it can tear because it does not hold the water. It just gets kind of destroyed with the water. I really love experimenting with the pastels. You can use pastels also together with stencils. Then I would recommend pan pastels because they are a bit easier to apply over a stencil with their soft tools and because of their consistency. But there is a video already on my channel where I'm using pan pastels with the jelly plate. I really like to make the marks directly on the plate with the pastel sticks. And another technique you can use, grab a piece of paper, just some leftover paper. I'm using that backing paper from our stamp sets, and apply some pastels to the paper, and then you can press that onto the Gelli plate, and that will remain some really interesting texture, and you can do this a few times. I have a lot going on now on the Gelli plate, and now I'm going to lift the pigments again with the Titan Buff color. This time I'm trying to not cover it too thick, so I will get a lot of the pigment onto my paper. Of course, you can use any other paper you have. I just grabbed this because I have it and I like the format, because I thought about maybe making some greeting cards out of that. I really like that. I got a really soft texture with some vintage, with a vintage feel. And here's the other one that I've made just before. I'm now going to do the same. Again, I'm now using white paint because there is a lot going on the plate, and I will not get the pure white. I will just use it to pick up the pigments from the plate. You could use gel medium as well, whatever you like. Just, I would not recommend a dark color. Well, maybe we should try it with a dark color, and the pastel pigment should sit over the top, and maybe we would get some really interesting textures. I think I did this years ago with some black paper and metallic pan pastels. I think that was quite a pretty background. I love this one. What I like about that is that you can turn it around and see which version you like the most. And again, I have a little bit of the paper torn, and now it sticks to my Gelli plate, but not a lot. You can also draw kind of a pattern with the pastel over the paper and then press it onto the Gelli plate and make kind of a pattern on your Gelli plate. Of course, you could draw directly on the Gelli plate, but that will just give you a different look, because here you have the possibility to kind of stamp it onto your Gelli plate a few times. I picked a blue here as a contrast against the yellowish color I already have on the plate. I'm just curious to see how this is turning out. I will let this print sit overnight, just to make sure that it's completely dry, and will pick up as much of the paint I have on my plate, so the plate will be clean afterwards, or almost clean. In the meantime, we are going to prepare some collage papers that I'm going to use over the top of these backgrounds. And I'm using our new Wheat Love stamp set. That's the Wheat Love 2025. It's not the same as our rubber sheet Wheat Love stamp set. It's a bit different, and it has quite nice images. I already stamped these ones for an Instagram reel, and I will now finish the whole paper with some of the other images. I'm using the VersaFine Clear in black, and I would just stamp all over that sheet of paper. What I really love about these images, you can combine them and create a bigger branch if you stamp backgrounds or whatever. And there are also some smaller flowers on that set that match this kind of branch. And you can then just make it look completely different. And that's what I really like, because not every image then looks the same. Here I'm trying just to stamp onto the back side. That's a very absorbent paper. It's a calligraphy paper, and the ink I use over the top is usually black, but it does not show up black because it soaks up the ink so much. And the backside is a little bit more smooth, and I thought about trying if the backside would work better, but it does not. It's even worse, I would say, compared to the front. If you want to have a really saturated image, I would recommend stamping with acrylic paint over the top, but as I have these detailed images, I didn't want to lose the details with the thickness of the acrylics, so I decided to go with black. And also, as I plan to create some kind of vintagey style backgrounds, it's not that important. Vintage usually does not use black, it uses some muted colors in gray or brown. And here is my finished piece of paper, and I'm going to use some of the images on these backgrounds. This one I think turns out not so vintage, so I will just keep it for a future project. I really like it. I think it's a fun background, but not as vintagey as I would like to have it. And I will use the others now to create some backgrounds that I then can either make into cards or maybe stick to an art journal page as an art journal background. I'm just going through these to see if I would like to use them all with collage or not. I think I will not use the yellow one with the collage. I will just use it and stamp on it. But for the other three, I plan to apply some of these stamped paper. I will make some bits of it and cut the images out, and then I'm going to adhere them with some gel medium. To cut those out, I don't use a scissors. I will just use some water with a brush, and then I draw around the image, and then I can easily tear out the image I want to use. I will now adhere the pieces with some ultra matte medium. I really love this matte medium because it's super matte. It has no gloss at all, but it's not as textured as the clear gesso, so it's perfect for everything. Clear gesso was my favorite before, but I really love this now because it does not have that gritty texture, and if I use it in my sketchbook and I draw over the top with color pencils, they don't wear down as quickly as with the clear gesso. Same with the neo colors. They sit over the top super thick and opaque, but it's not as gritty that it scratches away so much pigment. Not sure if this makes sense or if you know what I mean. But of course, you could use clear gesso. You can use just normal matte medium as well. I'm using a silicone brush because that's easier to clean, and I prefer this against a normal brush, but with that soft paper, a normal brush will maybe be a little bit easier because it does not tear the paper as easy as that silicone brush. With the wetness of the clear of the matte medium, the paper can tear quite easily, so you have to work very carefully. That's quite a nice one. I will go over the top with some white paint later to tone it down and blend it in a little bit more. And then I will do more stamping to build up layers and give the whole background some more depth. I'm now going to do the same to the other two papers, and then we will I will come back and we will add the white paint. As I didn't have collage on that last one, I'm going to stamp this directly with some stamping ink, and I'm using similar colors that I have already on the background. So I'm using a green and kind of a reddish color. To create these images, I'm using all these stamps from the set and combine them, so every image looks a little bit different. I will now use some of the script image that is on the Mix It Up 6 stamp set, and I'm going to use this with some red ink and stamp this to the background. I think I'm going to keep this as it is because I like it really much and I do not want to change it. And I will now add some white paint to the collage papers, to the collage backgrounds. They are dry and I'm using a white watercolor. I'm using the Art Graf Tailor Shape. Watercolor usually dries lighter than it looks wet, and that's why it's sometimes a bit difficult to decide how much paint you need. And I definitely used not enough because once this will be dry, it will turn out a lot lighter and I will have to add a second layer to it. I'm going to speed up this part a little bit more, so you don't get bored. I also sped up some parts before, as you have for sure recognized, because the video was almost an hour long, and I think that's a bit too long. And as I said, when it's dry, I felt that it was too light and we need a little bit more white around the edges of the collage to blend it in a little bit more. So I'm adding another layer. Whilst that paint is drying, I'm going to think about what to do with that background that I've stamped before. I like it really much, and I thought about maybe I could use it as a background in my art journal, and that's my watercolor journal. It's almost square, not exactly, but almost. And here I'm just going through the pages to see where that would fit color-wise, and I'm picking this mushroom page that I created quite a while ago. I haven't worked in this journal for a while. And on the right side, I have used our textured mushrooms and created an autumnal scene. And it has the same colors, so I decided to use this background on the left side. I'm just cutting it out with my scissors all around the edges of the print. And then I'm going to adhere this with my glue stick to the book. I'm going to close the book immediately to make sure that the edges don't come off with the glue stick. You need a little bit of pressure to make sure it holds and stays in place. I will post the project or the art journal page that I make on this background anytime in the future over on our shop blog. There is a link in the video description. Check it out. You will get a lot of inspiration because we share a new project almost every day except of Tuesdays. So there is a lot going on. I'm now going to stamp the dried backgrounds with more layers and the same images, and I picked Memento inks and I picked colors that are matching the background. This will create depth on the background and more interest, and I also really like the look of these stamps stamped over each other, because it gives you the feel that you are in a field of weeds, and I think it's a perfect subject for a vintagey background or vintage papers. As always, I'm linking up the products I'm using in the video description and also the blog post where you can have a look at the close-up images of the finished papers. I think this one is my favorite. I really love the colors and how it turned out with the layered stamping. I think this gets almost a wintry feel with the light images. It's almost as kind of a frosty, it has a frosty look, I feel. I think that's also a good idea to make winter backgrounds for Christmas cards, for example. Yes, and that's the last background. As I said, you will find finished projects with these papers over on our shop blog, and also today you can have a look at the close-up images. I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope we will see us next time. Bye!